Okay, shalom. Very happy to see you, Bob. And we're pre-recording this, but hopefully when you pre-record history, then it's still history. So what we're going to be talking about today is how Root Source got started and very quickly go over the years that we were working most together as partners. How's that?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Okay, so just give me a second and bring on the page and share the page here. And we started in 2014 when we met.
On the
So
walls of Jerusalem.
that's right. Why don't you? Why I know that I always tell that story from my perspective. So why don't you tell it a little bit from your perspective here?
I came to Israel because I felt God sent me to Israel to try to be a blessing to the Jewish people. You were an invited speaker at Christine Dark's prayer conference in January of 2014. You came there to help advise us as Christians to pray for Jerusalem, how to stand guard and pray for the peace of Jerusalem. And we were introduced. There's a picture of us against the wall, and the rest is history.
Talk a little bit more about this meeting.
Well, so after our prayer time finished, we were along the ramparts there, and it's a very unusual day. A lot of things going on in the clouds, in the rainbows, and very unusual things up there. And it was a little bit distracting, but you brought us all back into focus at the end of the prayer time when you said, Christine, are you done with this prayer segment? Because if you don't mind, I'd like to announce something or say something. And so she said, okay, sure. Yeah, we're done. Go ahead. And you said, there was about 20 of us gathered there, a little over 20 people, all Christians except for you. And you looked at the group and said, I had an idea come to me a few days ago, and my wife tells me this is the best idea I've ever had. How many of you Christians standing here today would be interested in learning Torah from a Jew, me, over the internet? And there was this little gasp that went over. This was 2014. This was not happening on the internet in 2014. And there was this gasp that went across the audience and like, what? You would do that. And at that very moment in which the audience gasped, I felt like the Holy Spirit was telling me, this is why you came to Israel. Help this guy be successful. And so without knowing it at the time, because I really wasn't familiar with all these scriptures, like in Zechariah 8:23, I was grabbing onto your seat without even knowing. I was saying, okay, this is your idea. I feel like God is saying, this is a good idea. How can I help? That's really the essence. That didn't happen on the walls. It happened at a coffee shop on Emek Rephaim a couple of days later when we agreed to meet and just to get to know each other a little bit. And that's when I shared this thought that perhaps I could help you.
Well, I remember you coming up after that announcement and saying you'd like to be my first student. And I said, "Great, let's be in touch." I don't think that there was even WhatsApp in those days, so we were in touch by email still.
Yes.
And we set up to meet, as you said, and it took about 6 months of schmoozing to flesh out the concept of a root source.
Yeah, and I remember you wanted to go to the National Christian Broadcasters conference that year,
The
and
National Religious
in
Broadcasters
Nashville,
Conference, yes, in Tennessee,
right? NRB,
in Nashville.
NRB,
Yeah.
yes. And so we met there and walked the show floor and asked people, sort of shared some ideas of what if we were to do this, how would you react? And sort of thing, and got some feedback. And you're right, it took about 6 months to really fully flesh it out. But it only took 3 months to decide that we ought to do something together. And I think we officially we sort of incorporated RootSource as an entity in Israel on April 1st of that year, which happened to be Nisan 1. I love it when the Jewish calendar and the Gregorian calendar line up. Every few years it happens. And that was one of those times. So we got to start right on the beginning of second quarter. And as an old finance guy, I love to have nice quarterly boundaries for reporting purposes.
I wonder what I raised my eye just now when you said every few years that they line up, but it's probably true because the Jewish months, the lunar months, are 29 or 30 days, and the Gregorian months are 30 or 31 days. So that's 1 or 2 days difference. So every month, if we start out at the same month, the first of the month, like this April and Nisan, as you mentioned. So when Nisan comes to the end, it's only the 29th of May, the 29th of April. So when May comes to the end on the 30th, so the next month after Nisan, which is ER, will probably have finished about 3 days earlier. So it's really about, I believe, 30 months between. So it's almost 3 years. I did not realize that it took so long for the months to get to that point. So yeah, wow, pretty cool. Anyway,
No,
yeah.
I'm
So
still very.
pardon me?
I was going to say, things like that is what we would talk about. I was so young in my learning and my Jewish studies then. You were my primary teacher. I mean, it's not just that we were coming together to create this internet site to teach, but you were teaching me all the time, just like what happened right there. This is the way it is. You learn as you go. I'm sure you're even thinking right now about that verse about, teach them along the way, wherever you're going, your kids, your mentors, your mentees, the people that
Yes.
you're training, you're teaching, whatever, you teach them along the way all the time.
That's right. And that is really, I'm gonna do a little commercial over here, or a public service announcement. What I do and did with you is what I offer everybody, and that is, let's just schmooze, let's just talk. For us getting together at the beginning, a lot of it was just getting to know each other. But if something came up in my mind that reminded me of a verse or reminded me of a Jewish teaching, then I would interject our conversation. I do interject our conversations, and sometimes take over the entire conversation with that kind of study. So that's very important. I
And,
remember
and
that we spent a lot of time trying to figure out what the right model for this would be. Because if I remember correctly, it was God who told you that you have to help an Orthodox Jew with a business. And I had this idea more of as a nonprofit. But you said, no, I'm sorry, it's got to be a business. I said, well, if that's what God says, that's what it's got to be. And we originally started out with root source being, well, I'm skipping a little back and forth over here. We fleshed out the idea. We started out not with just me as a teacher, but we recruited probably close to a half a dozen other teachers. I remember Rabbi Ilan Adler, who taught the Pirkei Avot, the ethics of the fathers, the chapters of the
yes,
fathers. I do believe my friend Seth Young, Shimshon Young, started out with Biblical Hebrew, Introduction to Biblical Hebrew
yeah.
for beginners. This is all just off the top of my head. I think we started out with Avi Lipkin also, and I believe also Ken Spiro. Was he one of our first teachers also?
Yes, your course was the very first one to launch, Pray Like a Jew, and Rabbi Adler's was close behind. After that, it took us a while because we need to get the bugs out of the website and everything. So then the rest of the teachers launched that next year. What is it? Was it in April? Sort of the official launch was in 2015.
Okay, I'll share the screen again so that we can move on to the rest of 2014. 1 second, I split 2014 twice on That's when we met. And in 2014, the launch of the website was in September. And we did that, if I remember correctly, yes, we did that live, didn't we? Or maybe that was later. The launch of the website was in September, but only the year after we had a celebratory launch. So that's
Right.
when we started with your Blue Blood Moons ebook. And we were very blessed to start with over 35,000 subscribers.
Yeah, boy, that was a hot topic in those days.
In
And
those days, yes.
and we took an alternate view, that the blood moons seem more like a sign of God to restore the Jewish people to their land, and that even during exile, there was a covenant promise to return, and it was being signified in the heavens. And so I feel really good about that.
So soon after we launching, either after or launch, a little bit after launching that Blood Moons campaign, we joined together. We gathered together in the Begin Center, one of our favorite places in Jerusalem, and I believe we had about 100 people at that lovely event. And you were the keynote speaker presenting your idea, your thesis about the blood moons. And that began the space of reformatting that whole idea as the book. That book was our first book. Let me find it up over here. Israel First. What a great name for the book. The key to understanding the blood moons, Shemitah, promises to Israel, and the coming Jubilee. Yes, it comes out a little bit better on your side. And we, Baruch Hashem, sold thousands of copies of that book, which was launched about a year and a half after we met, really. So that was wonderful.
Yeah, and all these books, the revenue goes to Root Source to bless the Jewish people.
Yes.
That was for a higher purpose.
In 2016, our teacher, Rabbi Yehuda Glick, we didn't discover him. He was quite a popular teacher, but he was elected to the Knesset, and we created a crowdfunding campaign in order to give out, I do believe, thousands of copies of that book on college campuses. We raised about $30,000 for that. We only ran the actual campaign the year after. We published our third book because I skipped over the second book. You probably have a copy, so why don't you show it, of Jubilee Now, which was really a sort of a sequel to that book.
Yeah.
And that was the year 2016. In 2017, we actually ran that campaign, and we were able to give out about 4,000 copies of that book. Amazing. And my oh my, at this point, we changed our model already. That's about 2.5 years, and we decided that we would give people complete, free, full access to all of our content. At this point, I haven't mentioned it, but I do believe that we already had closer to a dozen teachers on Root Source, and each one was recording about 50 lessons on the average. So we already had close to 1,000 lessons on Root Source. No, with 50 and 12, so that's closer to about 500 or so. But it was wonderful. Now, what happened in 2018? We made a tour. I don't believe that you were there on the tour. Am I right?
Didn't I came in during the middle of it.
Oh, you came in the middle of the tour. That's right. And we did the tour together with our good friend Trey Graham. And most of the people on that tour were from his church. I like to call it my home church in Texas, First Melissa. And we got over 900. At that year, we passed the 900 videos on Vimeo and over close to over 250,000 views on YouTube. And that's when we presented the list to Speaker of the Knesset, Yuli Edelstein. and this was quite an important year. That was the year, if I remember correctly, when we actually published those two books, or that was probably the year before.
Yeah,
But
yeah, we published it as a big Excel sheet in 2018, and then you said, why not turn this into a real book? So Ray
and
McGowan,
it was a very successful book that we published um, in 2019. Here
yeah,
is a copy of that book. I don't have a, you got it. Show it again.
I beat you to it.
Yeah. And show the side of it. Show it by the side. This is over 1,000 incidents of anti-Semitism in Christian history.
Yeah,
And we also, at the same time, oh yeah, now I remember the different the rushing over. At the same time, we published 40 Days of Repentance, a companion guide to the list. Thank you for showing that as well.
yes.
And
Love,
we also began the nation's Ninth of Av that year, didn't we? Well, it wasn't
yeah.
us. We were the sponsor of it, but others did that as well. Very, very busy event. We participated in. I was already by that time. I was already going to Dallas for the second time. How I got to Dallas is also thanks to you. You want to tell that story, or shall I tell it?
You should.
Your father of blessed memory, you kept on reminding me that he'd been inviting me to come and meet him in San Antonio. And for some reason, I kept on pushing it off until I realized, my gosh, somebody's sending me a free trip to America. So I came to San Antonio, but on my way to San Antonio, somebody said, "Hey, I hear you're coming to Texas. I'd love to host you in my home, and we will be happy to, I'll invite some of my friends over there. I live near Dallas." So I said, okay. I didn't know how far Dallas was from San Antonio. So I landed in Dallas, and I got into a cab or something, rented a car, or somebody maybe drove me to Aunt Stacy's home in Granbury, Texas, which is about an hour south of Dallas, and therefore about 3 hours north of Austin. We were coming to Austin first before we went to San Antonio. You live in Austin. And I knocked on the door there in Granbury at Aunt Stacy's house and opened the door. There were about 50 people in her living room. And I said, wow, this was the first time I was ever in Texas. I said, but it's not going to be the last time, because people sat rapt. They were just listening to everything that I had to say. And that was very lovely. So because of that, I came back to Texas, to Dallas mostly, about 9 times in 2 years. And I only
Wow.
stopped when COVID stopped me, which I was actually very grateful for, because it was running me ragged. I was making a tour of the United States every 90 days, basically. So I was there for like 2 weeks on the pretty much, and I would spend about a month or two preparing for the trip, and then a month uh, debriefing from the trip. So it basically took up all of my time. So I'm pleased that I managed to discover Zoom. Also, because of COVID, everybody discovered Zoom. I'm pretty sure that we would meet Bob weekly by phone. We met daily at the beginning.
That's right.
We were meeting by phone. But after COVID, then we started doing Zoom meetings like we're doing now. So I want to leave enough time for Revis. Hopefully, at this time when we're recording this, we haven't recorded with Revis yet, but to continue all of the continued history of Root Source. Have you got anything else to say before we finish up this time?
Thank you. I do have one thing to say. After working with you for 5 years, from 2014 through 2019, I really felt a call to write a book about the changes that had happened in me and through you to the world. And this book is called 5 Years with Orthodox Jews. It, as I like to say, it took 5 years to live it and 2 years to write it. And this isn't just about Gidon, although you're featured in it very heavily, foremost. but you had also introduced me to over 2 dozen other Orthodox Jewish friends that had and the stories that came out from that. So this is about meeting the Jewish people, and it's really a call to Christians. Really, the mission of ReadSource is to provide a place for Christians to connect with Judaism in a respectful way, a way that you can ask questions and learn. And that's basically the premise of this book is, if you do that, if you connect with Gidon, if you connect with other Orthodox Jews who love God and are open to connecting with Christians themselves, and God sees that and blesses you with insight, first from the Jews themselves, and secondly, from the Spirit of God, that when he sees his Christian kids learning, interacting respectfully with the Jewish people, something is transacted from heaven, and some of those long-standing questions that you've had in your faith and in your life, he begins to pour in answers. And so this is a 40 stories, 40 different stories of what God did in and through the Jewish people and the interaction that I've had. So this is really, although the list is the most important, truly, from its documentation of anti-Semitism over the last 2,000 years, this is the funnest book, is the most enjoyable book of the bunch.
I would say that the list, it describes the past, and 5 Years with Orthodox Jews describes the future.
Oh, well said. Hey, I wish you'd said that before I filled this.
So, listen, what can I say? I only came up with that idea 5 years too late. Bob, it's been wonderful talking to you, and I'm looking forward to continuing to be your very good friend, best friend for many, many years to come.
Likewise. Love you, man.
So, Daraba, shalom, shalom.